Okay, so welcome to what's going to be day 20 and day 21. I did not record a video yesterday because we got some pretty crappy news, I guess I'll say, when I got into Pie Town. So yesterday I hiked about 21 miles into Pie Town. It was mostly a road walk. And once I get into town, I found out by some other folks that the National Forest Service has closed 3 national forests north of Grants, New Mexico. We're on the way in north. And so Pie Town goes to Grants. That Grants is the next city. So essentially, the CDT is closed for the last 300 miles of New Mexico. And the Forest Service did this to essentially mitigate fire exposure. They had, I think they called it a level 3 emergency for fire. There's been a number of fires down in New Mexico, and another one that actually sparked up just a few days ago. Actually, there's a group of us that hiked that area the day before the fire started, and then they were closing roads within like the next day, and there was smoke in the area. So once that fire picked up, and it actually spread pretty quickly, the Forest Service decided we're closing the national forest because we can't have people going in and accidentally starting more fires. I'm waving my hands a lot. There's actually a lot of gnats here, so sorry about that. They were not around because the wind was blowing, but the wind just died. So all right, a couple of things. Closing the national forests, all 3 of them, is rough. I was hoping, like, I've attempted 3 through hikes, one of the Colorado Trail, one of the PCT, one of the CDT. And this one, I really wanted to make sure I could get a authentic through hike, which is finishing the entire trail in one season. So this is a bit frustrating. I knew there were going to be closures. I don't think I've ever had a hike or long distance hike where there haven't been closures. So it's to be expected. I think it's a little bit frustrating, not just because we don't get to finish New Mexico in the traditional sense, but also when I set out for this hike, I wanted to make sure that I chose alternatives because the CDT has a lot of alternatives. And I wanted to choose alternatives not based on what I wanted to avoid on the CDT, but what I wanted to see or do on those alternatives. So for example, I did the Gila River alternative, which actually is 100 miles shorter than the official CDT, because I wanted to see that river valley and corridor, and I wanted to see the high route and the low route because I heard and read they were absolutely beautiful, and they were. I missed 100 miles on the proper CDT, and I would like this hike to be an actual 3,000 mile hike or more, but I made the decision, like, I want to see the Gila alternative and the Gila cliff dwellings, and I'm okay with that alternative of missing the additional 100 miles on the CDT proper and going through the Black Mountains. There's an alternative coming up. The CDT proper is about 25-ish more miles. And I was actually going to do the CDT proper because there's some interesting volcanic figures or features over there. And then it rolls into, I think it's called the Bonita Zuni or Zunai alternative, which goes through a lot of volcanic activity. And I wanted to see that. However, I was in Pie Town and I was reading the comments. I think I mentioned previously that the app that we can use for maps, users can make comments, and users did make comments, and the comments were, there's no water. Like, there's water, the first, I don't know, 3 or 5 miles in, and then there's water another 10 miles after that, and then the rest of the 50 miles, so basically, 35-ish to 40 miles, there's no water. You got to lug water for 2 days, and that's a lot of water and a lot of weight. And the road miles, Pie Town to Grants, the next city, is a road walk. We just did 18.5 miles of a road walk today, and now that we cannot do the alternative because they're closed because the national forest, I think there's like 52 more miles of road walking, I think it is. I could be a little bit off in that number. It's close enough. So it's a lot of road walking, and the CDT proper would have been a lot of road walking as well. But lugging water is not something I want to do for 2 days, because the water sources are either scarce or dry. So I did make a decision. Hey, I'm gonna use a shorter alternative to get to the Bonita Zunai alternative. But then the Forest Service closed the national forests, and that Bonita Zunai alternative is now closed. So I don't get to see it. I'm disappointed. I'm sure next year, or maybe later this year, I'll be able to come back and do those 300 miles and see some of this stuff on the CDT proper. But the Forest Service, in their announcement, they closed all 3 national forests from tomorrow, the 19th, until December 31st of 2022. So they're not messing around. They're basically saying the danger is so high that we believe that if people go into the national forest and with a stove, with a cigarette, with an accidental dropping of a spark, or someone decides to disregard the fire restrictions and make a campfire, they feel like it's going to go up quickly. And they also feel that if people are in that area, it's going to spread so quickly that they're not going to be able to get people out. And then I think that the third is probably the firefighters are spread so thin right now that they don't have the personnel that would be able to respond quick enough to sufficiently address the fire, either here or elsewhere. So I understand their reasoning. I will say, and I think I've said in previous videos, that there are many natural water sources like streams or creeks that have been considered, what's the word I'm looking for? Reliable. Like in the guides that we're using or the maps we're using, they say, hey, these are reliable water sources and they're natural, and they've all been dry. So perhaps New Mexico has a good monsoon season, so July, August, maybe they get a dousing of rain and the Forest Service says, hey, we're going to reopen the national forests, and maybe later in the hike I can jump down and get those 300 miles or 300-ish miles. So the plan now is to hike to Grants. So it was going to be a 4-day. I think I can probably get there in like 3, maybe 3.5 now. So I'll get there in a few days, and I know you folks haven't seen any videos for, it's probably close to 2 weeks. I think the 12th was the last time that a video was posted. So it's been 6 days, and there's a lot of videos from Silver City through Pytown. What is that, 9 days, I think, and there wasn't sufficient Wi-Fi. These bugs are insane. There wasn't sufficient Wi-Fi. There wasn't sufficient Wi-Fi, and I wasn't able to actually get a strong enough, like 3 bars, 4 bars strong enough signal to post a video. So you all are going to get a lot of videos in a short period of time. So that's the first thing, is to get to Grants and get some Wi-Fi and do some planning and post some videos. The next thing I'm going to do is, a few of us have been talking about, hey, what about a road walk? We don't like road walks, but if we do it in a way that alleviates some of the weight in our packs, so we're doing what is known as slack packing. So you're only out for a day, so you can carry a very light pack with just the water and the food that you need, and maybe some minimal gear, and so your pack is extremely light. You can do some road walks for multiple days, take a break, do some more road walks, and kind of piece together northern New Mexico, not using the trail proper, but still being able to put footprints from Mexico to Canada, just using the road walks. So that's an alternative. Another alternative is to skip this part and jump up to Chama, New Mexico, which is right on the border before we start Colorado, and to check out the snowpack to see, hey, is the snowpack viable for people to hike through? So that's a second alternative. And then a third alternative that's been kind of bantered about is, what if we just skip up to Wyoming? hike across Wyoming, because right now, trail leg wise, like we're used to desert and we're used to a lot of flats. And so we could hike across Wyoming pretty quickly and then just continue on up to Canada and get there early. Early meaning August, but yeah, late July, maybe mid-August. And then after you get finished with Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, jumping back to Colorado, and just doing Colorado south down through New Mexico. And if New Mexico is open, come all the way back down to Grants. So that's a third alternative that people are discussing. I know that a fire just popped up, I think, yesterday in Pagosa Springs, which the trail passes by Pagosa Springs in Colorado. That one's 350 acres, so I don't know if they've got it contained at all. I don't have internet access at the moment. So the concern is that Colorado could start getting hit with some of this stuff, especially if the snowpack's melting quickly, and they could start closing things. So it'll be an interesting year. Things like this always happen on a through hike. I don't think we were expecting it to happen quite this early and quite this drastic, meaning like 3 national forests are being closed. Instead of just areas where fire is actually occurring, they've closed areas as a precaution. So those are the two, I think, big pieces of news, the closure, and then also like choosing alternatives based on what I want to do rather than avoidance, but I'm having to start choosing alternatives for avoidance. So that's kind of icky. Today's shout out, I may have already shouted out Trail Angels, I believe, but today's shout out is for people who go a little bit above being a trail angel. So there's a hostel in Pie Town. There's 2 restaurants, there's a post office, there's an RV park, there's a hostel for CDT hikers and other people that are doing, crazy trips. And then there's a bunch of residences, and that's it. That's all that's in Pie Town. It's not, I wouldn't even call it a town. It's tiny. And there's a person by the name of Jefferson who stays at the hostel and kind of runs the hostel. And people like him and people like a woman by the name of Jetta, who she is refilling a water cache that is kind of a makeshift water cache, but it's in the middle of a dry section, and it's helping a lot of hikers get through this extremely dry state and the conditions in the state this year. And so without Jetta filling the water, without Jefferson helping run the hostel and keeping us in line and things running in order, it'd be difficult for us to get through some of these sections, like these sparse sections of the CDT. So a big shout out to people who are trail angels, but sometimes go above and beyond being just trail angels. They make it a passion. So we definitely appreciate all you. So I hope everyone's well, and I will talk to you tomorrow and the next day, and then hopefully I'll be on Grants and we'll get some of these videos posted for you. So talk to you soon.